Hey, I'm Ernie. We are here with Jim today, and Jim, what do we have put on today for your fifth wheel?
We put on a electric over hydraulic disc brake.
Awesome. And I think we went with the Hydrastar as well for your actuator on the inside.
Yes, we did.
Well, cool. Why don't we go ahead and take a look on here, and some of those advantages of that hydraulic brake system is just going to be a little bit of a smoother ride, especially if you do have that proportional brake controller. And since you got the RAM there, I think you're all kind of taken care of with that. Right. Going to make for a smoother ride. And we actually did end up hiding it here over to the side, which is pretty nice. So we're still leaving a lot of room here in the front compartment for you, Jim, which is great because, you know, space is limited, of course, in our fifth wheels. And so we actually have it mounted up here on this side. We ended up using those two brackets we mentioned earlier here just to kind of suspend it there off to the side. So are you liking that, just kind of getting out of the way?
Absolutely do, yeah.
Awesome.
It's out of the way,
cool.
And didn't take up any extra storage, so yeah, it was very good.
Sweet, yeah. So a lot of our internal components are going to be kind of hidden right now, a little hard to see. Of course, you do have your bleeder valve at the top here, which can be really nice. Now, Dave's already gone ahead, your installer, got this all prepped up, bled all that line for you. So nothing you're really going to have to do at the start here, but if you do start noticing a little bit of, a little bit of issue with it, you can go ahead and bleed those guys out. That way we're not having air sitting in our lines, and then our brakes are working how we want them to.
Sure.
So going to be a little hard to kind of see how all of our lines are being ran right now, but we kind of bring ourselves to the corner here and we kind of see how it's actually going to our brakes.
All right.
So we actually have our hydraulic hoses coming through here on the side of our compartment for our propane, and that's what we were talking about, having that plastic bushing in place, because as we core that out, we don't want any sharp edges actually nicking or cutting that hose. Yeah. So that's why we went ahead and put that guy in there, giving you a little more protection, which can be great. And I know you said it before, a concern with yours was having any kind of hose or anything exposed, in an area. So this way we're tucking up on the inside. And so our line is basically coming down the side of our fifth wheel here, all the way, of course, back to our brakes, which is great. And I believe you went with the Kodiaks, didn't you, for that brake action, which is great. So, and again, those hydraulic brakes are a little more responsive than your normal. You had the drum brakes before, you were saying, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So is that kind of what led you even to kind of go this route? You were having trouble with just kind of feeling that weight behind you?
No, it wasn't really trouble. Just had a trip last year to Tennessee and pulling the mountains, and I could tell the electric disc, drum brakes were getting a little spongy because they're getting warm.
Yeah.
And so I wanted something a little bit more efficient.
Yeah. And you could kind of feel that in the back of the truck, right? Yeah. Kind of chugging on you. Awesome.
I wanted something that had better stopping power, and that's why we did this.
Sweet. And that's exactly what we're going to get, right? We're going to have that electric response, which is therefore we're going to turn that into our brake fluid, which is going to push into our brakes and then give us the braking power that we're looking for.
And this is what our actuator looks like when it's installed. We installed it here in our front compartment. We want it at the front of our trailer, and ideally we would like to get it high as possible to where we can still easily fill the top, but we keep it higher than what the length of run for our line is going back to our brake assemblies. That'll just help it gravity bleed and make things bleed a little bit easier. If possible, you can tuck it up out of your way. That's kind of the ideal location, so that way you still have access to the front of your compartment here. We needed the Hydrastar actuator because we did an electric over hydraulic conversion where we went from electric drum brakes to hydraulic disc brakes. Hydraulic disc brakes require a higher activating pressure than a drum brake system. A lot of your drum brakes, if it is a hydraulic and it has an actuator, might be like a 1200 psi actuator. With disc brakes, we need at least 1500 psi. And this guy's got 1600 psi, so we've got a little bit of headroom on here as well to be able to ensure that we can apply our brakes properly and reduce our stopping distance over what electric drum brakes would do. Included with the actuator, you get your wiring coming out of it. That's pre-installed there that comes out. So you just got 4 circuits that you'll need to connect to get this up and running. And the actuator has an internal proportioning valve inside to ensure that it's delivering the pressure to the brakes evenly, so that way you get nice smooth activation. It's much more natural feeling in an electric over hydraulic brake system versus an electric drum. The electric drums just seem to apply a little bit more jarring. These apply much more natural, and again, they reduce your stopping distance. And a lot of these trailers we put these on, you can use your manual slide and stop the truck without even using your truck's brakes. They have that much stopping power. So now that we've covered some of the features of our actuator here, if you follow along with me, we'll discuss how we got it mounted up here and show you how to get these wires connected and where they belong. We'll begin our installation for our actuator by determining where we can install it and how we're going to get it mounted up. Now we're in our front compartment here of our trailer, so we're just behind the fifth wheel hookup in that compartment right there. This is where our battery was located. And ideally you could want to try to put it on the side wall so that way you're not taking up compartment space. And I like to put it higher if possible, so that way this is the highest point. That'll just make bleeding the brake system a little bit easier. If this is the highest point, you can kind of get a little bit of gravity bleed working with you there to help you out. So the way we got this mounted up here, we just kind of held it up first and determined, hey, it's going to fit in this kind of cutout here. So that's really nice. We can kind of hide it in there. We just need some bracketry in order to install it. And we ended up sort of making our own bracketry here. You can buy these here at eTrailer. These are the short no drill brackets. They're really designed for like getting a 4-pole connector mounted up on your hitch without having to drill into anything. It comes with a little clamp so you can clamp it around your hitch. We don't need the clamp from the kit, but the rest of the parts actually work out really nice for us. So you'll have your bracket here, and there are holes that's pre-drilled in this bracket for mounting up a 4-pole connector. We line up one of those holes with the existing hole here on our actuator, and we just ran our bolt through and attached it. I did start with using the bolts that come in the kit with this here, but I did eventually decide to upgrade to a larger size because it just felt like it was a little more secure with these larger bolts. But you can start with the ones that come in your kit to just help you line it up. And once you've got it screwed into one of the holes here, we just kind of held it until it was flat, nice and straight, along line, so it's all flush and everything. And then we marked the other hole here. And then we just drilled it out. We used a 1/4-inch drill bit to drill out the hole in our no drill bracket, so that way it matched up with this other hole. We had bolted it to this hole though, so that we were able to just kind of move the bracket over and just kind of use this as a template to drill it out. After we did that, we just came over here to the other side and we did the same thing. We matched up the outside hole here with the existing hole in the bracket, and then secured it, marked our other hole, and then drilled our other hole. We then just used our hardware here that we do have to provide. You have to provide your own hardware. You could use the ones that come with the no drill bracket. Those should work probably just fine. Again, I just felt like a little bit beefier would be better for a long run. So if you wanted to upgrade to 1/4-inch hardware, you could do that yourself as well. After we got it mounted onto our no drill brackets, we drilled out holes in the no drill bracket here on the end. It has a 90-degree bend in it right there, but that's normally just solid across. So I just, on each side of it, I drilled out a 1/4-inch hole. After I drilled out the holes, I just held it up here in the location I wanted to mount it, and I marked those holes here on the wall. So we're going to head around to the other side real quick, because you want to always check before drilling and see what's on the other side. And there were components here we had to move out of the way. And here we are on the compartment that's just on the outside of that wall that we were looking at. The customer's propane tank was attached into these straps right here, so we pulled that propane tank out of there. We don't want to drill through that. That would be pretty catastrophic. So get that out of the way. And once we got that tank out of the way, we were able to see that kind of roughly in this area here, there was nothing that was going to really be there. So then we went ahead and drilled out those marks that we made. And then we did just kind of run the hardware through and then run it down to secure it to the sidewall there. And that'll keep everything nice and secure. While we're also out here, be a good idea to note, you're going to have to route your lines from your actuator at some point. The lines don't come included with your kit, but we sell them here at eTrailer. And if you kind of see where we've got our actuator mounted, we did drill a hole here as well to be able to push our lines through. We drilled that out to a 7/8 diameter, just using a step bit to do so, because you'll see it's got a kind of a plastic grommet on it right here. We sell these here at eTrailer, and they require that 7/8 hole in order for those to snap in, and that'll give you plenty of a large enough hole to be able to feed any of your lines that you need through there, and that'll protect it from any sharp edges on our metal. All right, so now we got it mounted, we need to start wiring it up. So we've got 4 wires coming out of it. You've got a blue, a yellow, a black, and a white. I've saved the black and the white. I'll show you how I'm going to connect those. The white is our ground and the black is our power. I've already connected the blue and the yellow. With the blue and the blue will connect to your brake controller output, and the yellow will hook to your breakaway switch. So when the pin pulls for the breakaway switch, it'll activate this and let this thing know that a breakaway event has occurred. This one, again, just goes to the brake controller. So figuring out how you're going to connect to these can be pretty tricky. The easiest way that I found to do this is to see if you can find the existing trailer brake wiring. And that's actually what this red circuit is right here. that ran down. This was originally the power feed from the brake controller that goes to the electric brakes on the trailer, and this white one here was the ground for the electric brakes. Now I've moved the ground, so you might be thinking, hey, this yellow doesn't go to ground. I've moved that, and I'll show you why I've moved it here. If we follow this wiring up, this goes kind of up here, and it eventually goes to our fifth wheel at the front where the junction box is. This part of the wire here where I cut it goes down the trailer and goes back to the brakes. So you can just leave that wire there. Once we cut it here, we've disconnected the electric brakes completely, and it's okay that this wire just stays in the trailer. So we're gonna head over to the Kingpin and look at that junction box so I can show you kind of why I'm using the ground wire here for my connection on the yellow wire, which is supposed to be our breakaway switch. The blue wire just runs up from the brake controller on the 7-way, so that's just goes right there, so that's nice and easy. So let's take a look at the fifth wheel Kingpin so we can show you what we did in there.
All right, so here we're at the kind of our Kingpin here at the front. This is the junction box. I pulled the cover off of it. There's just a screw there and there that allows you to pull the cover off. I then pulled our wiring out of here because we wanted to assess the situation here to see how we were going to get our brake controller signal to the actuator, and also how we're going to get our breakaway switch cable hooked up to the actuator. So I pulled the wires down here so I can kind of see them, and then if we follow the blue wire up here, you can see that red sheathing. So I always kind of look for that, because if you can see, a lot of times it's a gray sheathing, not a red. I was looking for gray originally. Then I see the red sheathing here, so I know, hey, if I can find the red sheathing in that compartment, I know those are my brake wires. I can also kind of verify that it's got a blue and a white in it to further verify that I've got the correct wires. Now you'll see that I cut the white wire. That was originally connected to ground. You can see right there where it was connected originally. We're gonna hook that to our breakaway switch. Now the breakaway switch is hooked to 2 spots. It has 2 wires coming out of it. One of the wires is gonna hook to a power source. And we've already tested and checked, and the black wire that is connected to the white wire with the blue stripe here, this had power on it. This is our hot wire. So we wanna leave the one alone that has power on it. If you need to check it, you can use a test light. Just hook one end of your test light to ground and the other end, poke it in here and see if it lights your light. If it lights it, it's got power on it. So we know that's the power side for our breakaway switch. We're gonna leave that alone. We need the output side of the breakaway switch. It'll only have power when the pin is pulled from the switch. And that's the other black wire here. We can kind of trace those back. They're inside of this little guy here. So we just traced them to see that there were 2 black wires right here that were coming from our breakaway switch. We followed them in here, verified the one was connected to power, and then the other one here, normally you'll find it connected to your breakaway switch. Normally you'll find this to your brake controller output, the same blue wire. If we kind of just take a quick peek right in here, there was the black wire connected to our brake controller output. We no longer want the output from the breakaway switch connected to here. We need this to be connected to that yellow wire on the inside. So we cut our ground wire off here, connected it to the yellow wire. So if we connect our black wire here, that's going to connect it to that yellow wire in there without us having to route any wires. Because routing wires to this junction box here from your compartment can be quite difficult to get those wires to feed through. So if you've got the opportunity to reuse wires that are here, repurpose those if you can. So I'm going to strip both of these back so we can make the connection over here. And we're just going to grab our butt connectors. We are going to use heat shrink butt connectors. Even though this is enclosed in a compartment, the compartment does not appear to be any kind of weather tight compartment. I can see some holes in it and stuff, so dew and moisture is going to get into this compartment. It's not going to be nearly as bad as any wiring under the trailer or anything, but still want to protect it. So we're going to crimp one end onto our white wire, which again is going to the yellow wire on our brake controller, on our brake actuator. And then the other end of our butt connector here, we're gonna hook to the black wire that we removed from the brake controller output circuits. This is the output from the breakaway switch. All right, just double check, make sure those are in there good, and then we'll grab our heat gun to shrink that down. All right, so we've got our blue and yellow fully connected now. You saw how we repurposed those brake wires to be able to connect those. We're now gonna move on to power and ground here.
we were charging up our battery here. Let me just get these leads out of the way. And we're gonna do our power next. Now for power, we wanna make sure that we've got proper circuit protection on here. So we've got a 40 amp circuit breaker that we're gonna be putting in between the positive post of our battery here and the black wire, which is our positive lead for our brake controller. For our brake actuator. So we're gonna mount this up. We're just gonna mount it right here on the pillar here. We're just gonna use some self-tapping screws to run this in. All right, so we've got it mounted up there. I just ran them in. I couldn't really show you guys because I had to get my whole body in there to kind of get enough pressure to run those self-tappers in. But that's exactly what we need right there. So now we'll start hooking it up. I'm gonna remove the nut from the silver post. The silver post will attach to our actuator here. And the black wire is going to connect to it, so we're just going to kind of run that right over there, and we'll attach a ring terminal to it. You can get ring terminals here at eTrailer. We're going to use a smaller ring terminal on this end here to attach to our our circuit breaker. All right, crimp that one on there. This will then just slide right over there onto our circuit breaker, and then we'll just re-thread the nut back on there. All right, now this is the full length of wire that comes off our actuator here, so there really wasn't quite enough left to kind of cut it and attach it to that and then get to our battery here. So we're just going to be using a small extra piece of black wire. We do sell additional black wire here at eTrailer if you do need some. So we're going to take this additional black wire, we're going to strip back one end, and we're going to place another one of those small ring terminals on it to attach to the copper post or bronze colored post. That is eventually going to head over to our battery positive. We're just going to crimp this one on. Just remove the nut from the bronze post, slide our ring terminal on it, and then reinstall the nut. After that, I'm going to take the little bit of extra wire that I got here and trim it to a little bit more appropriate length. I just kind of grabbed a little piece that we had extra here. And I'm probably going to run it off like this direction for this one. So we'll run it back like that. And then reinstall our nut. And then this is just going to kind of run down. We're just going to try to follow these wiring that already exists there, so that way we know it'll pass into our the lid that was on here. We did remove the lid. It's just kind of sitting right up here. All right, so this is like a pretty good length right here. So we'll take the excess, cut it off. We can then strip this back. And on this side, we're going to be placing a larger ring terminal. We need one that's going to be large enough to be able to slide over the battery post there. All right, so we'll just slide that on there like that. And then we'll crimp this one down. Now this is going to attach directly to the battery positive post here. We're going to wait to hook that up to the very end, kind of our last step. That way we don't have any live anything here that we're kind of working with. Nothing's going to be live, so if we accidentally touch something, we're not going to cause any shorts. So we got it all prepared. We'll be coming back to just hook that up at the very end. Now we'll go ahead and take care of our ground wire. This is just going to go down, and it's going to run over here to the negative post. Once again, it's a little bit too short on the length of wire that we've got here. So we'll probably use a little bit of this extra black wire that we've got here to kind of finish that little run. So I'm going to extend the white wire with a butt connector, and then I'm going to be placing one of the large ring terminals on the other side of our piece here to make that extension. All right, so we got our ground wire extended here, so we can bring that over and attach that to our ground post there. So we're going to remove our nut on there. It's a 9/16 for our battery, but they do vary a little bit, so you just want to make sure you've got the appropriate one for yours. We're just going to slide that ring terminal onto the post and then reinstall the nut. All right, so that's looking good there. Now we're gonna grab a 3/8 deep well socket, because before we hook up that power wire, we wanna make sure we snug up our circuit breaker nuts that we had put on earlier. Make sure we get those snugged down. Okay, we'll snug this one down. All right, both of our circuit breaker connections are snugged down, so now we can head over to our battery positive here for that last connection. I'm just going to remove the nut on top of our battery here. Take our wire, slide it into place, and then reinstall the nut. So now we've got all of our connections made there. At this point, if we used any heat shrink butt connectors, we're going to grab our heat gun, shrink these down, and then we can kind of just route our wiring kind of back in this area and tie it out of the way. So I'm going to grab my heat gun again just to finish up on those. And these ones here in this front compartment really didn't need to be heat shrink butt connectors. You can get away with a regular one. This should be fairly free of moisture, but it does have to be a somewhat ventilated compartment for your battery. So again, it could get just a little bit, so it's not going to hurt to put these on here. All right, so we've got our actuator mounted. We've got it fully wired up. At this point, the next thing you'll need to do is install the lines for your system. So however many axles and stuff you've got, make sure you run your lines back. We've got various different line kits available here at eTrailer. The one we're going to be using on this particular one today is a flexible line kit, so it's all flexible from the actuator all the way back to each individual brakes. We've got more traditional ones though as well. If you want to go with a hard line style, you'll get hard lines from your actuator all the way back to your axles there, and then you do get flexible lines to go from the hard line down to your disc brakes with those kits. So both of them work out really great. These ones are definitely easier to install, the flexible ones, and you need less tools. With the hard line, you're going to need a bender tool. So we're going to go ahead and get these installed here. We've got a video showing you how to install those as well. And once we get those on, we're going to show you how to fill this up and bleed the system. This actuator requires DOT3 brake fluid, so make sure you've got some on hand. All right, guys, so we are back up here at our actuator now. We finished installing our line kit. Our actuator's all wired up. Our brakes have been converted over from the old drums to the caliper and disc setup. At this point, we just got to get all the air out of the system and get the lines fully bled full of brake fluid. We're going to be using DOT3 brake fluid for this. I've removed the cap up there, and I took a little napkin and I wrapped it around it to catch anything that I spill, because this is a pretty it's a pretty strong chemical that's inside of here, the brake fluid. It really likes to eat paint and stuff, so you want to try to avoid getting this on things. It's not the best to get on your skin either. It kind of dries you out a little bit, so just try to avoid that as well. So we're just going to top this up. I got a light up there shining down inside of it so I can see, so we try not to overfill it too much. And you're probably going to need a couple of these bottles here. That was a partially used bottle there, about half of it. And then we're going to open up the next one here, start filling this up. We got a total of 3 bottles here. We're probably going to use 2 completely and then partial of that third one, so just keep that in mind. These are about 12 ounce sizes. All right, I can see the level there. We're almost all the way to the top. That's where we want to be. Your cap here, you can just leave that sitting right there. You don't want to put that back on. If we leave the cap on, we bleed them. This rubber seal in here, as it's sucking the fluid out, as we're kind of bleeding that out, the lower pressure that's in here from us pushing it down will actually suck this seal out of the cap. And it is kind of designed to extend out some, but if you suck it all the way out of there, you can damage the seal on the cap and then you can get air in your system and stuff. So just leave that cap off there to avoid damaging it. And now we're gonna have to enlist ourselves an assistant to help us bleed these brakes. Because one person, that'll be me, I'm gonna be back at the brake assembly to open up the bleeder. Your assistant though, he'll either need to be at the front of your trailer here to pull the breakaway switch pin, which would activate the actuator, or you could plug it into your vehicle. We're gonna be using a test box, which simulates a brake controller output. If you plug it into your vehicle, you can use the manual slide on your brake controller to activate this as well. So your assistant could be doing that. So we're gonna grab somebody here real quick to operate our test box, which acts like the brake controller. So we're back here at our brakes. We've got our assistant up there at the front. I've hooked up a hose on here. If you got a clear one, that's a little bit easier so you can see the fluid that's coming out of it, and it's just draining into a bottle we got over there. We just drilled a little hole in the top to funnel it into there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open this bleeder up. I've got a 5/16 wrench here. I'm opening the bleeder, and then our assistant's gonna activate it. So go ahead, Shane. He activates it, and then it's pumping some fluid out. I'm gonna go ahead and close it off there. Okay, Shane. And we closed it off. We got some fluid out, but the reason why we closed it is because the pump up there moves a lot of fluid very fast. So after you have it open for a couple of seconds, you probably want to shut it off and check the level of the fluid inside of your actuator. If the actuator goes dry, you have to start this whole process all the way over. And all we're going to be doing is just repeating exactly what we did, but taking a break in between here and double checking that fluid level to make sure it stays topped up. We're just going to rinse and repeat this procedure until we get clean, clear fluid coming out of here with no bubbles inside of it. Okay, ready? So we can see that we got bubbles in it. It's coming out. That's looking pretty clean there. So we're going to go ahead and close it off. All right, so we got that closed. So we can double check our fluid level. If everything looks good there on the fluid level, we're going to move on to the next brake and just repeat that until we get clear fluid through. Once we get all clear fluid through, we'll probably come back to this one just one more time just to double check to make sure we got all the air out of it. All right, so we went around and we finished bleeding the brakes. After this one, we moved up to that one, then we moved across to the other side to bleed both of those. When starting bleeding your brakes, I do recommend starting at the furthest caliper away from your actuator at the front. So we've got the actuator stalled on the left front side, so we're on the right rear here, starting with this one. That just gets the majority of the lines bled with this first one here, and then you're just kind of taking up the last little bit going to each individual caliper. So yeah, we got all that done. At this point now, we are ready to check for any leaks that we may have. This is a very high pressure system, and the way to check for leaks is we're gonna pull the breakaway switch pin. That's gonna just deadhead our system, run it up to its max pressure, and we're gonna just check each fitting. So at each caliper, we're gonna check those, and at our 3-way and our 4-way T, we're gonna check those as well, and at the connection at the actuator. So I'm gonna go pull that pin, we'll grab our flashlight and just make sure we ain't got any leaks going on. All right, so we're back up here at the front. You guys are looking at the actuator. I'm pulling the breakaway switch pin now. The pump is activated, and we're looking right here at the fitting, getting real close up on it, making sure that there's no wet spots, that there's no drips. That's all good. We'll then move to the next fittings and just check those all the way back at every single one. All right, guys, with no leaks present, that pretty much finishes up our installation here. If you want to just verify it's working properly, you can pull that pin, and you should not be able to turn it when the system's activating, and then you should be able to turn it when it's not activating, just like now, we're not activating. We've already tested it. We know that it holds. So at this point, you just get your wheels back on, make sure you get those torqued down to the manufacturer's specifications, and you're ready to hit the road. All right, so we've gone ahead and hooked it up to our toter truck here that we use for moving around our trailers. We've got a brake controller installed on there, so as we pass on by here, we're gonna activate the brakes so that we can see that it's gonna stop. It should stop the whole truck with just the power of the brakes on our trailer. And there it is. Just the power of the brakes on our trailer was able to stop the truck. So that's pretty much what we're looking for. We've got plenty of power there available. Go ahead and take off again, and we'll just activate them one more time just to make sure everything's working properly with them. And there we go. Trailer stops the truck like it's nothing. And that completes our installation of Hydrastar's electric over hydraulic brake actuator on our 2018 Shasta Phoenix.